All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining our session today, our panel discussion today on the code of conduct. In today's hyper-connected world, it just takes one post on social media for the trust that your organization has worked hard to gain and earn to come crashing down. Code of conduct is a sort of valuable resource for your employees to help them distinguish from what is acceptable behavior and what is not at a workplace. Decisions are vital for organizations as choices and decisions have consequences and significantly impact the culture and reputation of an organization. It is therefore crucial for organizations to define acceptable behavior and create a culture of inclusivity and discipline. A code of conduct is a set of guidelines that corporates often employ to manifest all such principles in one place and expect their employees to stand by and comply with. So, in today's discussion, we will cover some interesting topics such as the purpose of a COC, what should a COC include, challenges faced by corporates in effectively rolling out a COC, and tips and takeaways from our panel of experts. Which brings me to my next point, introducing our panel of experts who will share their knowledge with us today. Our panelists represent different industries and bring a rich and diverse experience to the table today. So, without further ado, let me welcome our panelists. Our first panelist is Abbas Jalis Rizvi, who is currently working as the head of talent acquisition, Southeast Asia, Oceania, and India for Ericsson. With more than 18 years of experience, his sphere of expertise includes talent acquisition, workforce planning, HR project management, operations excellence, HR service delivery, and business partnering. In his current role, he also manages an additional profile of ethics and compliance from an HR standpoint for the organization. Pass out of NIIT Allahabad, 2004 batch, Abbas also has interests in people, data analytics, history, and literature. Abbas, welcome to our panel. Delighted to have you join us today. Our next panelist is Bhargavi Taunk. With over 15 years of experience in HR and L&D and a post-graduation certification in human resource management from XLRI Jamshedpur, Bhargavi is currently DGM HR, heading the HR business partner role for the entire corporate team of Arvind Fashions Limited. She's been part of the L&D team at Arvind and previously Bata, Ample Technologies, and OnTrack. In the current role, she also manages the POSH and DEI committee within her organization. Bhargavi, welcome to our panel. Again, delighted to have you on board as well. Our third panelist is Sujata Nabar, who is DGM Corporate Ethics at Mahindra & Mahindra since December 2021. Sujata is an attorney specializing in legal affairs and compliance management with over 19 years of work experience in the in-house legal counsel and ethical practices space. As an in-house legal professional, her experience in contract negotiation and management, strategizing and leading litigation management, legal risk assessments, and regulatory interface. Her past stints include Diageo, Vodafone, Marico, Inox Air Products, Bunge, and Pale Agro. Sujata, welcome on board. Again, delighted to have you join us and today for this discussion on the code of conduct. And our final panelist is Dheer. With over 14 years of experience, Dheeraj is currently working as Director, Workforce Planning, and Head of Compliance, IR and ER at Dealshare. Dheeraj has also worked as HR business partner for companies like Bharti Airtel and Tata Projects, and Head of Compliance for Sodexo India, and Circle HR Head for Indus Towers in the recent past. Welcome, Dheeraj. And once again, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all our panelists. Delighted to have you join this panel today. So, without further ado, I'd like to sort of kick off, our discussion really. And I want to kind of start with something very basic, in the sense of what do you all believe is the purpose of a code of conduct, right? You all represent different organizations. Can you share with us your perspective in terms of why you believe the code of conduct is important? All of you have an important role to play within your respective organizations, especially with respect to the COC. So, Abbas, if I could start the discussion with you from your perspective and your organization perspective, what is the purpose of a code of conduct? Why do we talk so much about it? Why is there so much discussion around the COC? Would love to hear your thoughts.
Hi, everyone. Alex, just a small correction. It's NIT Allahabad. I believe.
I'm so sorry. My apologies.
Okay. So, and Yeah. So from an organization perspective, there's one part to it, that what exactly code of conduct actually encompasses, and then the other side is that how exactly as an organization we are, catering to it. So one part is that, you know, from how exactly an employee should behave, what exactly is the expected culture within the organization, the conduct altogether of everyone, right from management to the last man on the floor. Code of conduct and behavior, the code of ethics actually has changed now. It's encompassing a lot of other things. As the organization now moves into a lot of different facets, including, the technology space, the cultural space, the branding space, how exactly the organization wants to be perceived. Everything actually happens to be part of the larger all-inclusive document, which is the Code of Business Ethics. Just to give you an example, uh, Code of Business Ethics now obviously also include the conduct in the secure IT security space. How exactly you are supposed to deal with the assets that you own, how exactly you are supposed to deal with different cultures when you interact with them. So it's a branding space. It's how exactly the talent actually has to be treated. But the most important part of it, and I'll just conclude the statement with this, that it's not only about how exactly the employees should behave, but the other part is that it's a guiding document and an assurance from the organization that this is how exactly we'll be treating you also. So it's a two-way interaction document. Just to corroborate what exactly I'm trying to, just to provide an example of what exactly I'm trying to say. So when an organization says that we and every organization has a written document around the same, that we treat our employees with respect, dignity, etc. in the workspace. It's not only an ask from the employee that how exactly he would be conducting himself with the other people, but this is also an assurance from the organization that how exactly we'll be treating you while exactly you are working with us. So as I said, this is not only a document in terms of behavior, but this also helps, guides, and safeguards the interest of employees while they're working out in the organization, from a technology perspective, cultural perspective, talent perspective, and a lot of other things, privacy perspective. Now we have got even privacy also out there. So how exactly the organization will be safeguarding your data, how sensitive we are with the data. So your personal data with us, how exactly that would be safeguarded. So this is a complete guiding document around the same. That's exactly how exactly we see to it.
Abbas, that's very interesting because you what one point that you particularly mentioned, which is basically with respect to the fact that it's a two-way contract, right? I mean, it's not just about what the company puts out there. It, of course, it is helpful for anybody wanting to transact with an organization. You could be an employee, you could be a potential vendor, you could be a possible investor. A COC is really something that explains what a company is all about to the world at large. So if you sign up with an organization, whether as an employee or as a vendor, you can expect that the organization will also treat you the same way that they have outlined in their COC. So in a way, it helps both parties assess each other. I think that's a very interesting take on the COC.
Yeah, I mean, and the most important piece is that this has to be a flexible document. It's a flexible document, as you said, and you rightly included, the partner organization in case if there is any people on partner organization. So this has to be a very standard, flexible document altogether. And I also sometimes I also use this word that it's a document of talent attraction. When you actually see this document, it basically tells you how exactly this organization perceives itself, and also wants to show to its employees that what it stands for. So this is a very so this is it's a legally binding document, no doubt, but it's more of a talent attraction brochure also, probably sometimes for its employees. So it's a very, very flexible, and it has to be a smart document. Yeah.
Yeah, flexible and smart, and a talent attraction document. I think all very key points, Abbas, because today's day and age, that's really what you need to sort of put yourself out there and attract the best talent. And I want to come back to this one point a little later in terms of how do you really put a COC out there? Is it going to be just in the form of a document that people read? Should companies now look at making it more attractive, more like a video with lots of, colors and sounds and all of that stuff, make it jazzy? But we'll come to that in a bit. Bhargavi, your perspective, Arvind Fashions, I think you have a workforce that's fairly young, right? I mean, it's a good mix of experience. So how have you sort of approached this aspect, the COC, and sort of what according to you is the primary objective of really putting a COC out there?
Yeah, good morning to one and all who's joined this discussion today. Thank you, Antony, for that question. I'm here to also learn from the rest of the panelists and the participants. While you said rightly that we have a very young workforce, so code of conduct for us is not just about the set of desired behaviors that one should have at a workplace. I think it's even more deep-rooted. It talks about the values an organization has, right? It is in line with the value that every organization has. And I think it gives you a guideline of having to make a decision, keeping in mind the values. So we usually hear people saying that this is what we do in our organization. This is how we are. And I think code of conduct forms the basis of culture and values of an organization. Like I also say people that this is what it is when it comes to looking at whether my value system matches with the value system of an organization. And that really helps in having a long-lasting relationship of an employee and an employer. So for me, code of conduct, and for us in Arvind, the code of conduct document is not just about a set of behaviors, but it's about making decision, keeping in mind the values at every point in time, whether it's with the employee, with the vendor, with a partner, with anybody who's associated with us. And since we have a very young talent, very young set of people in the retail and in the corporate, we look at making it very, very simple and also easy to understand. This becomes a base of what we look at in people and how they represent the organization on a day-to-day basis.
Cool. Thank you, Bhargavi. And I think that is really what most organizations today are, sort of looking at, between, what Abbas and you have just shared with us. Clearly, it is it's a document that the organization uses to sort of, portray what it wants to convey to the world about what it stands for, and it is something that people can expect, the kind of behavior or what have you. Okay, Sujata, Mahindra, it's a conglomerate. It's massive, lots of employees and varied employees, right? I mean, you've got varied businesses as well. It's not just a particular business that you have. So, is the approach any different for your organization from what Abbas and Bhargavi have shared? Do you approach it a little differently? Do you have a one size fits all kind of a document? So how do you, I mean, let's start with the basics actually. From your perspective, what is really the objective of the COC? I mean, why do you have one, and what do you convey in it?
So Antony, the way we look at it is it's a guiding principle document for our employees to make the ethical decisions when they are in dilemmas, or when they are in market and they have to take a call. They would use this as a guiding principle of how ethically, or what are the values that Mahindra stands for. But let's look at the COC not just in the angle of a legal binding document or something which is there for our ethical choices. We also need to look at this document, as Abbas mentioned, that this is the preview of our organization for any candidate who wants to join the organization. They would see what are the values of the company and whether it resonates with his or her personal values. One angle is that our stakeholders also view this document as prime before investing, or before becoming a partner with us, or becoming a vendor with us. So it could be also looked as an external document, which shows the value system of the company. Apart from that, if you see today's ESG, the laws that have come in, the ratings that many institutes given, The prime document is your COC, which is being rated, or the parameters of what a good code of conduct has is rated by those agencies to give you the overall ESG rating as well. So we should not look at this document just as a thing that tells us what needs to be followed by the employees, but it's a larger space. It's for the stakeholders to understand our value systems, our principles and purposes.
Clearly, I think most organizations are now taking this a lot more seriously in terms of what it conveys to the world at large. And you rightly mentioned ESG. It's one of the factors. I think organizations are being rated by their COC in what it says. Of course, other factors as well in terms of what you do, but it's a statement of intent, I think, is what you're really saying.
Right.
Perfect. Thank you. And Dheeraj, as head of compliance for Dealshare, again, probably an organization with a lot of, with a more younger workforce, maybe similar to Arvind fashions, but of course, a wholly different type of people that work in your organization. What's your take? The need for COC, is it as important from the perspective of employees, prospective investors?
Dealshare has a very young population, guys, mostly from IT, IMs, Excel,
right,
premium category of employees we have. So for us, code of conduct is a baseline document for all our employees and stakeholders, which clearly calls out what are acceptable behaviors and what are not acceptable behaviors, where employees are the pivotal role. While the purpose of a business is to make profit, code of conduct exactly pins down how we are going to make the profit.
Right.
So COC is basically the how part of an organization. For me, code of conduct is an organizational way of life that shapes the culture of an organization. When I look at it at a broader level, it defines the way institutions and individuals stands for inside and outside the world. Corporate governance is the key for the ecosystem in which we are operating, especially for a startup like us, where funding is a way of life. And it makes all the difference, the way you are rated by the credit agencies and the way you are perceived in the market. And that's how we have reached here within 3 years, a unicorn. So for us, code of conduct is a baseline, most important document, which reflects the world, what we stand for.
That's interesting, Dheeraj. I think you've given a slight emphasis on the fact that it's also important for you as an organization when you're raising capital, right? As opposed to some of the other organizations that have been around for many, many years. As a fast growing unicorn and a startup that's quickly aspiring to gain market share and add investors, it's a pivotal document. It's what you use to kind of speak to prospective investors and attract them to you. So fair enough. There is a similarity in what all of you have said, yet it feels like each organization has probably a separate or a distinct focus on why a COC, what they use, what they believe the COC is most relevant for. But it's clear that the commonality is that all of you believe that the COC is a document that definitely has sort of importance in the larger scheme of things from a corporate communication perspective as well. So before we go to the next question, I just want to take a couple of minutes to actually share a couple of slides with the audience at large, just to give them a little bit of perspective on where this whole conversation around a code of conduct actually originated from. Around the 1900s, it originated in the United States and basically consisted of a codified set of ethical standards, not really subject to legal enforcement, but a codified set of maybe a statement of intent, if you will, or just to tell the world at large that this is who we are and this is what we're about. And in the 1950s, it started gaining relevance, primarily in the US due to the antitrust legislation. So it was a way in which organizations started putting out their what they were and what they stood for. Moving to India, it's basically the code of conduct kind of finds its place in the in the whole corporate governance discussion, and started with the Kumar Mangalam Birla report, committee report, which brought out the issue of corporate governance for listed companies. And the committee was set up by SEBI to suggest inclusion of a new clause, the famous clause 49 in the listing agreement, to promote essentially good corporate governance. Then you had the Naresh Chandra committee in 2002, which was set up by the Department of Company Affairs, again to examine various corporate governance issues, primarily around the auditor-company relationship, rotation of auditors, defining independent directors, etc. So these are all elements that started coming in to sort of talk a little bit about what all different aspects of corporate governance. But ultimately, you will find that today, the way the code of conduct is defined by a lot of organizations, it takes a lot from many of these committees that were set up over the years. So then we had the Narayana Murthy committee, which provided recommendations on issues such as audit committees' responsibilities, audit reports, independent directors, related parties, risk management, director compensation, codes of conduct, and financial disclosures. We've also had over the years information that, sort of codes that have been put out there or guidelines that have been put out there on corporate governance from time to time. And the CII even put out the desirable corporate governance code in 2009 by way of something that can be used by, corporates. And then in 2013, the Companies Act incorporated in its Schedule 4 a code for independent directors. And SEBI's LODR, or listing obligations and disclosure requirements regulations, in 2015 also dealt with different aspects of what an organization, especially those that are listed, that would need to sort of incorporate in their code and comply with. SEBI then constituted a committee, so which is the last committee as of now in the series of committees that we have had in India, under the chairmanship of Uday Kotak, called the Kotak Committee, in June 2017, to suggest suitable policy changes required to be carried out in order to enhance the efficiency of corporate governance norms for Indian listed entities. So the Kotak Committee report was submitted in October 2017, and the same were accepted by SEBI in March 2018. I'm not sure if all of them were accepted, but a fairly sizable chunk of what the Kotak Committee recommended was also adopted by SEBI. Now, a lot of this is primarily for listed companies, right? All of these. But what you will find is that in today's day and age, more and more companies, whether they are listed or not, they want their code of conduct to really speak about best practices, what they stand for, and so on and so forth. So which is why really today, more than ever, I think over the last, many years now, we're starting to find that organizations are more focused on the COC and what it really says. It's not just taking something off the internet and plugging in a few provisions and then you're done. It's actually a document that requires a lot of thought, and it really speaks to the company's culture, vision, mission, etc. Okay, so getting back to our discussion with our panelists, what should a COC include? And I know we touched briefly upon it in question 1, but what are the kind of, there are a lot of pointers that there are a lot of aspects to a COC that are very similar. And if at Rainmaker, we had reviewed more than 50 different codes of different organizations across India, just to get a flavor for what's in those different codes. And while we found a lot of similarities, but of course, each organization also each has its own areas of interest or areas of emphasis. So I'd like to get a sense from our panelists here. They represent such a diverse set of companies. What are the areas that you believe are important that must find its way into a COC, particularly from your organizational perspective, right? So Abbas, if you could share with us your thoughts on what what would be important, especially maybe from Ericsson's perspective, or even otherwise in your experience, what have you seen are important pointers that must find its way into a code?
So the most important piece, obviously, is the legality of the legal framework. The legality of that document. There are, and then obviously the cultural perspective. What exactly the organization, as I said earlier, that how the organization perceives itself and want the other people to see itself to be. What exactly it is representative of. Uh, but then there is an aspirational side to it. How exactly we want the world to acknowledge, and how exactly we acknowledge the world changing around us. So, the gender equality piece, how exactly it is emphasizing those aspects to the employees, that what we stand for. So that's it. And then obviously the other things. I'm not saying that the document can be very expressive, because an organization like ours, which actually exists in various parts of the globe, the cultural aspect and the acceptance of certain things like a third gender or binary, non-binary, etc. So obviously everything has not to be named, but then there has to be certain emphasis in terms of how we are aligned to the changing world, and how we expect our employees to actually represent what exactly we stand for. So as I said, the statutory part of it, the legal side of it, behavior side of it. Then there are certain softer aspects which can be the need of the hour. For example, we are emphasizing a lot in terms of how we encourage our employees, our people, to come up and report in case if there is something according to them, or something that they feel is not going right in the organization. How we practice business, or irregularities around financial side or anything. So there has to be an encouragement, and there has to be a sense of protection to those people who actually feel that it is the right time to come up. So that's also, so some assurance on that side should also be there in the document, where where the people who are actually working feel that they are protected by the framework within the organization, and obviously emphasizing in terms of how exactly we value that. So that's and then keywords specifically, where it is guiding its people. So that's, as I said, that protection for whistleblowers, that should be the guide, that should be there. People coming up and declaring their own conflict of interest, so that they are assured that they will be, it will be, if they are reporting it, they will be protected, and it will be a solution oriented environment that we will give it to them in case if there are aberrations that we see and they come out themselves. So what we call internally as the speak up culture, that actually has to be encouraged in that document. So as I said, legal side to it, then the aspirational side to it, what we stand, what exactly we feel that our employees should be the brand ambassadors for, and then protection for the people who actually are seriously trying to imbibe that culture and the way of thinking, whether it be from the softer side of discrimination, or it can be something around irregularities around finances, bribery, etc. So everything actually has to be encompassed into that piece.
Thank you, Abbas. So one question, and I want to just take us back to the discussion that you and I had previously. I'm keen to understand how does your organization look at a code of conduct? Does it have to be very detailed, which spells out everything? Is it something that is more of it's meant to cover just the basic points, keep it very crisp, brief? How do you all look at the code of conduct as a document? How should it be drafted?
Okay, so there is no specific mention. So if I say that it is brief, if I say that it is elaborate, there's no official declaration around the same.
Understood.
But I'll give you my perception to it. I believe it has to be a detailed document, and we see that it has to be a detailed document. And the reason being that when we take this document very seriously, we would rather like every employee to have, let's say, for example, if we go in ahead with an investigation and we are basically saying that some people or an individual goes against the spirit of that document, then that document should actually encompass the the constitution under which we are trying that person, or we are actually trying to put that. So it has to be detailed. It has to be detailed in terms of, as I said, as a guiding document for not only on the front of a cultural or behavioral aspect, but also from a front of the other environment that he lives in on a daily basis. Let's say, for example, child pornography. I mean, that has to be that has to come somewhere, that we do not stand for it, and what exactly we expect our employees to be doing with the same. So the employee should actually be very careful while even putting a USB in the system. So that has to be. I mean, I'm just giving very micro examples around the same. But then the employee should have. So if you really want that everything and every aspect of it should actually go ahead from a code of conduct perspective, then it has to be a detailed document.
Understood. And that makes sense. Of course, there will be challenges with the detailed document in terms of whether people will actually go through it. But of course, it's understood and deemed that you reviewed it as a part of the
and then there are solutions to it, which probably we can
discuss in the next one. Yeah, agreed, Abbas. Thank you. Bhargavi, your perspective, what all should be there in it? And again, coming back to the composition of your workforce, a younger workforce, like Dealshare, for both of you, does it matter that what goes into two parts? One is what goes into your document, and two, you believe it should be detailed, it should be crisp, very brief. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so let me go one by one. So first, when you ask me this question, what goes into it, I think when we are in a process of having a code of conduct, we look at three things. One is, of course, what Abbas mentioned, which is about the statutory requirement, the legal requirement, which everyone needs to abide by, and that needs to be one piece. The second piece is what we stand for, right? As an organization, where we are currently, and what we want to do and how we want to, represent our organization. What is it that we believe in? And again, it has to be connected with the values and the decision making. While the third piece needs to be something that we want to emphasize or we want to drive. So for example, let's say we are looking at diversity and inclusion as one piece for this year that we have as a financial year goal, right? So then for me, when we put it into a code of conduct document, it becomes a way of emphasizing the fact that we really believe in it and we want to drive this across the organization. So one is the legal, one is the current situation where we are, and the third part will be what we want to do as an organization. And then we emphasize that behavior again and again until we reach that goal. So when we construct a code of conduct, this becomes a base of how we kind of put this policy together or the set of rules together. That's about what needs to go into the COC. The second part, I may not completely agree with Abbas when he says it needs to be a detailed document, because usually when we have a code of conduct document, we also have a declaration that an employee signs in saying that I've gone through the code of conduct and I understand it. When we have pages and pages of documents, I don't know how many of them are actually reading every point of it and having everything in mind while they are signing the declaration, right? So I believe that it needs to have some amount of detailed understanding of what needs to be there in it in terms of pointers, but not really a very elaborate document. I think there are other ways of trying to reinforce it, which may be through reinforcement through snippets or other things. But at this point in time, when you're talking about a document, I think it needs to cover everything and it needs to be brief so that a person who goes through it understands it easily. It's simple to understand, while they also understand what we are trying to convey through it. And we strongly believe in it, right? So brevity needs to be there in a COC document. And with the kind of crowd that we have, with the kind of team that we have, expecting everyone to go through a long document with all the points in it and expect them to remember everything seems a little impractical.
Oh, fair enough. So very different perspectives, but very interesting as well. So I guess it is possibly also coming from the type of or the kind of organizations that you are. and the kind of workforce that you have that influences the kind of COC that ultimately is created and rolled out for your people. So thank you, Bhargavi. Sujata, your organization, again, sort of an Indian multinational, if you will, very large workforce, and you have different age groups as well. So A, what goes into the COC, and B, what's your take on whether it should be very detailed or whether it should be very crisp or somewhere in between?
Antony, as you rightly point out, we just launched our COC this year, and there was a lot of thoughts about how do we look at the new age COC. Definitely what goes into the first question that you asked, it is the moral values, it is the principles and the purpose that goes in the first pages of COC. And then it should be more about the legal aspects like your ABSE, the COI, the gift and entertainment, or the legal requirements for insider trading, your fair competition. So the legal aspects of, or the legal mandated policies should be, the glimpse should be available in the COC. Apart from that, the commitment to stakeholders with regards to the vendor codes or vendor supplier codes, or how do we market as a responsible marketer, elements of investor dealings, the misconduct, if any, in the, what can be seen as misconduct, the examples to that, as well as behavior at workplace. So equal opportunity, conduct at workplace, health, safety, or security of our employees. What is the policy regarding that? What is the policy regarding any harassment, posh or otherwise, any harassment in the organization? The new age documents also look at safeguarding assets, and therein comes in your privacy laws, the confidential data, how do you handle and how do you report in case of breach? And then comes in the last piece, that is of your administration of the code. How do you protect the whistleblowers? What is the policy? What is the policy for speak up, or what is the contact details for our ethics helpline? Along with, because it's an Indian company, you also have the contact details of the audit committee chairman to be put in. So this is the encompassing elements that we have seen or we have looked at when we devised a new COC. Along with it, we also thought of putting in some certain clauses on sustainability, because we are pioneers, or we are leading the ESG space also at Mahindra. So we would want to put in there the elements of how our program and how our sustainability policy is. So this is what we decided as a group, what we should put in the COC. Along with it, the thought, that second question of yours, which was on what prompted us to, or what have you done? Have you reduced the content? Have you looked at it in a different angle? So yes, we had a 48-pager document, and we thought that our team needs a refreshed code, something which has clauses which are less legal and more user-friendly, more understandable for the larger audience, as well as it should be branded. It should have elements with the new age requirements, talking about diversity, talking about inclusivity. Also, the words that we have used are gender neutral in purpose, in the sense of the elements of the new age change. So I think, when we did this document, it was a clear purpose that we have a large audience, a global audience. The policies have to be global, and it should encompasses the elements which are in line with the global leaders in the space.
Right. And I think that was, Sujata, the point you made about having made changes to it to bring it up to speed with what's happening in the world around. I think that's a very critical one. The world today is very different from the one that we lived in 5 or 10 or 15 years ago. And there's a lot more emphasis on aspects like diversity and inclusion. While at the same time, for listed organizations like yours, it's important that you're also conveying elements of prevention of insider trading and other, compliances that sort of help your employees understand, what are the, sort of important aspects of being part of a large group such as yours. Fair enough. And just one question for you, in addition to what, do you have one code for the whole organization? I mean, in all the group companies, or do you have different codes depending on the kind of company that falls within the group?
So we have one code, that is the group code,
Okay.
which is adopted by the other companies. There would be certain tweaks, maybe because of the name of the company or things, but the core elements of the code have to be adopted as it is.
As is. Okay, understood. And I guess, and maybe we can pick this up with Dheeraj. Thank you, Sujata. Dheeraj, so your take, what goes into the code, and also sort of your take on, especially for a company like yours, which is a new age company, very young, yet growing rapidly, adding workforce by the day. So what's your
This is
perspective?
the positioning in the marketplace with our investors.
Right.
While the intervening variables are the maturity of the organization, right? What are the policies that we already have? So, for example, if I have a whistleblower policy, I don't want that element to come into code of conduct, because these are two different policies, and every policy has its own independent policies. Also determine what would fall in code of conduct, right? Third is obviously the legality part of it. So typically, if I look at our code of conduct, it includes professional conduct and discipline, conflict of interest, and it is very differently positioned, because we want more entrepreneurs. We want people to take projects. We want people to be in the board. And unlike you might find many companies who have a very restrictive view on conflict of interest, because we want entrepreneurs to go out in the market and more people. Similarly, our slightly different. While the tenants by and large is same, you have discrimination, you have usage of company asset and internet, maintaining confidentiality, intellectual property, anti-bribery, anti-corruption, drugs, alcohol, personal relationship. Again, even in personal relationship, we are not doing any moral policing. It's very different from most of the organization. Only thing is you need to just declare it, and if you are in supervision and control, just go ahead and declare it. So while we have very similar tenants elements, the treatment is very different from a lot of other organizations. Yeah. So the other question you had.
Sorry, on the size or length of the code, and how detailed should it be?
Size and length. So we started with a very, very elaborate one. We started with 60 pages. And then we had a lot of discussions. So one is, what do you mean by simple? The language of Bear Act cannot change, right? It doesn't mean it is complex, right? It's just a language. So from language point of view, obviously it remains the same because it has a legal binding. However, from implementation point of view, we have ensured that it is concise into 10 pages, and we have different policies which we roll out separately. So while we have brief code of conduct, we have a different elaborate conflict of interest policy for it. So balancing both. And then we have also rolled out a presentation with examples, because our purpose is not to create any fear, but to create an excitement, to create a flavor, because we want young people to be very excited, they feel protected. Therefore, we have given very simple examples of each one of them, and we are very open. My email ID phone number is available to each one of them. You call anytime you feel that there is a certain sense of ambiguity, because the language is of the law, the Bear Act, right? And everyone is not very convergent about these language, but it is not complex. It's just a language.
Right. Okay, fair enough. Thanks, Dheeraj. So I think we are getting a lot of different perspectives from our panelists. One, I think the word that you use, Dheeraj, is particularly interesting. You want to create excitement. And I think that's the first time I have heard anybody use that word in the context of, of a code of conduct. I want people to be excited by it. I think that's very interesting. And that's very reflective of the times we live in, right? You want, actually, it should not be seen as a document that just lays down do's and don'ts, but also a document that should create a buzz, create excitement amongst the team and the employees to say, hey, I love working in this organization because this is what they stand for. Terrific. So before we move to the next question, I I also wanted to create a little bit of excitement while on that note. We're going to run a small poll on a subject that I believe is somewhat contentious. Unfortunately, we don't have any representatives of the big IT companies here. Would have loved to have had one of those reps as well. But we are covering the contentious issue of moonlighting. So
it's a split yes or no, nearly 50-50. Now the no's actually is increasing, but maybes are still nearly 40%. So I'm just
maybes are 40%. Okay, let's see. That's interesting, though. I wouldn't have thought it to be so close, but again, it's reflective of the times we live in, right? Ultimately, it doesn't matter if it's 51-49. But yeah, it's definitely interesting.
Between no and maybe.
Yeah,
it's between no and maybe, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just over now, I believe.
Poll is ended. Okay, great. So do you all want to walk me through it?
So there is an option of sharing the results. I'll just check it.
So what I have, yes, yes, 29, no 34, and maybe 35. So it seems like an even split, though, which is kind of interesting. Panelists, I'd love to take your view on this. How do you view the issue of moonlighting? Because if you had, I feel like if we had run this poll maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you would have found a lot more people against the concept of moonlighting, right? It somehow seems ethically wrong, apart from the fact that it's probably a breach of your employment contract, apart from all of that. So what do you all think? Do you have a view, Abbas? Do you want to go first on this?
Okay, so this is one of the very difficult questions right now. You see, first of all, if you ask me, and because obviously when we share on a personal note what exactly we think about it. I believe the word moonlighting is it's not a very beautiful word to actually use, because it really has gained a notorious, what you call it, it has a notorious reputation now with itself.
Yes.
So so the point is that it's a very difficult choice where the organizations are talking. They are floating in two extremes. And I believe that this is a time when the organizations should think about what exactly they want to, imbibe. At one point of time, we talk about gig working, So, and we try to encourage it, and in all the seminars and the presentations, we write gig and we, glorify it and so on and so forth. And then suddenly, when it starts happening, we call it moonlighting. I'm not saying that all the people working on two contracts are doing the right thing. Maybe they are bound by a certain contract, or maybe there are people in research and development who are basically working on very on things which probably would come up as patents for other organizations. I mean, I'm not including everyone to be a gig worker. I'm calling it not from an R&D perspective. I'm not calling it that a pharma company person working on a certain formula, which is very much hidden right now, can also go and start working or share the competence out with someone else. I mean, I don't want those topics, obviously, but I believe before we start talking about moonlighting, as corporates right now are working, they should actually go ahead, try to talk amongst themselves at what exactly is the right behavior, what exactly should be the right way to employ different people amongst themselves. If a person is working on contracts in two different organizations, is that perfectly fine? Because let's say, for example, I am not employed with an organization and I'm on contracts with two organizations. Is that fine? because we don't have a clarity as of now on that also. So the terms of employment or the type of employment actually have to be rethought. So we have to think and we have to talk amongst ourselves. Once we talk amongst ourselves, then the next responsibility actually is to take it further in different countries and try to, talk to the governments of those countries in terms of developing a new type of employment or giving certain frameworks, securities, and guarantees around that kind of employment. So it's a difficult topic. It's not something that we can really discuss because it has a 360-degree implication. So whether the type of employment that we are talking, what kind of people can actually do that kind of working? Are people in research and development also allowed to do that? Are people who are working in laboratories out in pharma companies allowed to do that? I don't think so. I really don't. But people who are doing IT, software development, coding, not of patent levels, but probably development levels, those people can go ahead. I mean, it's sharing of knowledge and sharing of resources should be encouraged in these times. Plus, but yes, it will start before it will not start till the time we actually have some safeguards and rules and regulations around the same. But I really don't like this word moonlighting at all. So that's my take on it. Specifically, if we are talking, or I mean, so again, code of conduct again comes in. Either you conduct yourself in a manner that I don't like moonlighting, I'll not even talk about gig working. But it is not right that if I go in a presentation and a seminar and I start saying, oh, gig working is the new way of functioning, and then kind of come back to my organization and fire 300 people because they were working in 2 companies.
That's right.
And that's also a code of conduct and not ethical behavior. So
Agreed.
That's my take on it.
No, agreed. And Abbas, I think the issue of moonlighting, or I don't know what's the other word for it, double hatting or what have you. Multitasking has a very positive connotation to it.
No. I mean, I'll say I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think at some level it raises issues of confidentiality and possibly conflict of interest. But primarily for employees, I think with consultants, I think the expectation, there isn't an expectation that you are exclusive to an organization. But with employees, full-time employment, those in full-time employment, there is an expectation that you are in an exclusive contract with that organization.
No, I do agree with you, but
we're starting to see now more and more organizations. While a lot of especially the IT companies have come out against moonlighting or double hatting or what have you, a lot of companies have realized that it's the kind of workforce that times we live in, and the workforce, the younger workforce, they're more comfortable with an arrangement where, I mean, they're gravitating towards companies which allow them to work in multiple organizations, probably because it beats the monotony of working in one organization. Plus, they believe that the learnings from another organization can be used in their own, and so on and so forth. So anyway, it's a complicated discussion. But Bhargavi, do you want to weigh in here? Do you have any thoughts?
I think it's a very subjective thing for organizations, Antony. I think it's more about transparency, right? So for example, if I'm allowed to work in an organization and I have the option of working in another organization, then I'm more open to be there because I'm comfortable. I can be open about it. And the fact that we're bound to an organization with, exclusively, I think even in like 10 years back, there could have been people who have done this, while they're not really comfortable talking about it because it's against the whole thing. But now you're giving an employee an environment to say that you can do what you want to do, but be very transparent about it and be within the, it needs to be in the interest of the organization. I think when you give a person a permission or, and you allow them to do something being themselves, that takes the level of connection with the employee to another level altogether. Yeah. I agree with Abbas when he says that there are certain places when you cannot allow it for the sake of, keeping it confidential and the information and all of it. But I think the trust level increases when you give them the, a permission to do what they want to do. And with the millennials and with the new age workforce, keeping them, dedicated to one organization is definitely a challenge. They want change.
So tying down the millennial workforce to one organization is difficult, and
Is
therefore
different, yes.
moonlighting is one way, or double hatting, since Abbas doesn't
I
like
don't
the
know
term.
what to term it as. Yeah,
I don't either. I'm just trying to avoid using
But
it because Abbas clearly doesn't like it.
like it, yeah. So maybe
Okay,
not
fair enough.
moonlighting, but yeah, that's what I think. Mm.
Fair enough. Thank you. Sujata, what about you? Large organization, a large group like Mahindra and Mahindra. I mean, I'm sure that's a challenge.
Of course it is. And unless we put in the required, the policies in place, this would not work. Though we understand that being transparent, the employees need to come in front and, inform the organization. But as Abbas said, it can work to a set of employees, not to the employees at large. So mixed reviews in our organization are also for this. So it has to couple not just with the thought, but there has to be more conversations. There has to be change in the policies, and not just our internal policies, but the employment policies as such. It needs to be driven with the government level to look at what is legal and what is allowed in this space.
Agreed. Agreed. Dheeraj?
Yeah. So for us, it's slightly different. First of all, we need to understand what is in the employment contract. So if your employment contract gives you certain level of freedom, the employees can go ahead and, I will not say moonlighting because I don't know what it actually means unless you define what is moonlighting. So definition is very important.
Employment with more than one organization, I guess.
Employment for what? Employment for remuneration, employment for what? For example, PF Act doesn't allow you to have more than one code. So you cannot, even if you want, the PF code needs an exit date and a date of starting. So if an organization I leave, unless as an organization I mark the last working date, you will not able to put this into the next organization, and you will not able to transfer your amount to the next organization. So the legal framework has certain restrictions which doesn't allow you dual employment. If it is about dual employment for remuneration, it is a no. But if it is for learning, it is for getting into projects, then it is possible. And the kind of contract that you strike in. So for example, if I want to move out and start my own company, the organization will say, okay, no more employment, come as a consultant, let's change the contract, and you start doing it. So the purpose is very, very important. First, how do you define your code of conduct? And then what are the clauses that you have in the contract? And what is the purpose, what the employee or the person is trying to do? And what is the legal framework? Whether the country land of that country has the laws in place or not. So all this will be a variable which will say yes or no, and it is the purpose which actually defines whether it is something to do or not. And if I don't use this moonlighting, I'm quite comfortable with people taking many projects, multiple projects. Their learning curve is steep. They become entrepreneurs, bring, every year, 2 years, we have 10, 20 employees building new organizations. We are perfectly okay with it.
Okay, fair enough. I think one of the key things that, as you were all speaking, I was getting inputs from participants, and they were all saying that transparency is key. Quite a few of them have said that it's important, whatever you finally agree, I think between the organization and the employee, there should be transparency. So nothing should happen where one party is totally in the dark, and the other party, has no idea what's going on. And generally, I think it's the employer that sort of remains in the dark. And as an aside, I recently read an article where apparently the IT department is now turning its lens to those who are double hatting or moonlighting and earning an extra income on the side. So they want their share of that as well. And they're going to be sending notices to everybody who's getting double income. Of course, if you've taken income in cash, then no problem. But if you've been paid into your bank account, then I think you're going to see that the IT department is after you and they want their share of the pie as well. All right, good. So thank you. That is, I think, thank you all for participating and to our panelists for sharing their views. We have we have a couple more questions, but I think, in the interest of time, I'm going to kind of move to our final question because we still have a bit to cover before we end this discussion. So I'm moving to the final discussion, which is really how should an organization successfully implement a code of conduct? Meaning you've put in place your code of conduct. How do you take it out there to the employees, or put it out there for the world at large, such that they are able to understand what you're about without what's the most interesting or innovative way to take this to your employees? So would love to hear what our panelists have to say. Maybe we can start with Dheeraj this time. Dheeraj, do you want to kind of share with us your thoughts on how to make the COC an exciting document, to use your words, and something that you can take out there and train people on in a very, very innovative way?
Yeah, we have done a lot of things. First, we started with all hands. So all hands is a concept when the founder talks about something which is exciting, which is new, which is of company's top priority. So we started with all hands, where our founders spoke about why we need to have this document in place and how it will help us to become even more larger company. As we grow, we are growing at a pace which is unprecedented. We need a framework for governance, for corporate governance, for governing the behavior. Then what we did is we had posters across the warehouses and the offices with a QR code. So like you go in a restaurant, you just go there and you scan and you get everything. So we had QR codes in all the posters, so that the employee can, in a single click, can access all the document on their mobile phones, smart mobile phones, of course. And what we did is then we put it on the internet. So adherence, training, and implementation. This is the three phases in which we implemented whole thing in a more exciting way, where people talked about what they feel about moonlighting, and they reach out to us. They had the cultural building elements to it, where we had sessions of culture building when we spoke about this. What do you think about this? We have put in place this code of conduct. You have got so complex, things to cover, and they came out with their own point of view, what they feel right, what they feel wrong. And then we are just trying the culture, and we had virtual training sessions, plus we have videos and PPTs to support them, and an external agency we have hired, which is also helping us to have a comprehensive 35 minutes, 40 minutes video, which covers every aspect of the instrument, which is valid, which is reliable, and which is, kind of help every employee to create excitement, understand, and do it on their own. We treat them as adults. We are not trying to tell them what they need to do, but we are trying to tell them this is how it works. You come out with your own agenda. You come out, you are all young adults, you know what to do and what not to do. Every Friday they really go out from the office 4 o'clock. So we understand that this is a new age, new world, and we are trying to create that capability. We are trying to give them all resources at their hand, and it is up to them how they want to go ahead and do it. Yeah.
So basically, make it, put it out there in formats that are different, interesting, engaging, exciting, posters, videos, what have you, and maybe keep pushing the sort of discussion on a frequent basis, so that it remains top of mind for employees.
Yeah, we included both push and pull.
Yeah.
Right? Pull from the point of creating excitement, providing more current documents, having all hands, having training sessions. I have conducted 30 training sessions, give them a customized view. But there is also a push where you have to go ahead and acknowledge the document. Unless you acknowledge the document, it will keep on coming to you. You have to go and do the training, and it just keeps on, adding to your manager. Your manager, it manages manager, and it goes to the founder level. So both ways we are doing pull and the push. So one hand, you have to really can't say that I don't know. right? I have no understanding. So what we are doing is we are giving you a multiple platforms, multiple ways, multiple resources,
Yes.
audio, video, PPT, uh, and customization. You can reach out directly, classroom, everything we're providing you, right? But it's up to you. How do you want to take it forward, right? But there is a mechanism in place for reinforcement as well.
Agreed. Thanks, Dheeraj. Sujata, looks like, I mean, organizations, like Dealshare have kind of tried to position this information in multiple ways so that you can consume it the best way you'd like to, but it's there and they're doing everything to make it accessible. How is it at Mahindra? How do you sort of deal with disseminating information about the COC and making it known to everybody?
We started with having a theme for our COC. If you see our COC, it is based on football, and all the elements of code are somewhere connected to the football, including the whistleblower, where there's a whistle, and there are fouls, there are cards of yellow and red cards, which are there for behaviors, right? So we thought that it's a new age document. So let's have a new age, new energy into the document. As Dheeraj was saying, the excitement. So it's not just at when the launch happened, we started the excitement in developing the document. And then definitely the ways that we percolated it around was the tone from the top. So it was launched by our CEO, followed by senior management videos, which was played across through emailers or our video, our TVs across locations, factories, offices, as well as all the visual elements that could be a standee, your posters, wallpapers that was coupled with our launch. Training is very important, and we have 2 layers of training: the induction as well as during the year. They do the training. This year, the format is gamification, given that our theme of the code is football and it's football season. So the gamification part comes in our trainings, and I think that will build the excitement. Also, what we thought that these are the elements what goes in for a launch, and it can happen for a 6 months period or so. How do we reinforce it on a regular basis? So we have initiated something as a real life case studies. So any cases coming out from our whistleblower or any ethical dilemma that we see, we have turned it into a easily available document on our internet, where people could see some ethical dilemmas and how do you answer them. And we also send as emailers certain elements of our case studies, or we use those case studies in our training to reinforce. So continuous reinforcement is definitely needed, and different organizations use different methodologies for that. So that's how we placed it around our launch, and quite excited and halfway of the journey.
Wonderful, Sujata. So is there extra excitement because now the FIFA World Cup is going on and all of that? So are you doing something around that?
Yes, it is.
Wonderful. Thank you. Bhargavi, your thoughts and your take on how the COC is sort of being sort of disseminated within your organization.
Yeah, so we definitely do it through trainings, which is offline and online. So we start when we have an induction, it's definitely part of the induction, whether it's for the corporate employees as well as the retail employees. Now we have a large number of folks in the retail who are out there in the stores and who are, there from morning till evening on the store, and they don't have the time to look at the laptop and all of it. So we look at, giving this information on a chat bot. So we have a chat bot that we use, which is on WhatsApp. And, there is information that goes out on it. It's more of a push mechanism. And then it becomes interactive, where they can kind of ask questions about the policy, whether this is included, what is the impact of this, and so on and so forth. And the chatbot gives information about what is there in the policy. And when there are certain things which is not answered by a chatbot, it it gets triggered to the a particular HR person, and they give a response in return. So that's one way of doing it. We also look at animated videos and quiz that is incorporated in the video that kind of, has simple questions with a few options so that we know they're going on the right track. Because CRC can be an elaborate and an exhaustive document, to make it more interesting, these are small things that we've been doing where it becomes more interactive. They know that they have completed going through the document, giving a declaration and all of it. But I think the key is to reinforce behaviors, and that doesn't have one specific way of doing it or one size fits all. We try and do it during our team huddles. We try and ask the leadership team to speak about it when we have a larger gathering. So the number of reinforcements that is done is never enough. And we believe that the more we talk about it, the more we say that this is what we do at Arvind, that makes an impact, and that's what kind of percolates down. So that's what we've been doing so far.
I love the chatbot idea, Bhargavi. I know it's a simple one, but
Yes.
sometimes simplicity, you get something that can be really effective. And I feel like WhatsApp chatbot would be really something that I'm guessing it's hugely popular within your organization.
Yeah, we call it Dhwani. Dhwani is the name.
Dhwani? Okay.
Yes. And
Lovely.
yeah, so people do interact on Dhwani for a lot of queries. Yes.
Perfect. That sounds interesting. All right. Thank you, Bhargavi. Abbas, sort of just to sum up and your perspective as well in terms of COC and how to kind of really take it out there to every single employee in the organization.
So one part, so code of conduct or the document exactly is a combination of a lot of different varied stakeholders within the organization. So all these various stakeholders, let's say for example, safety. Safety is a part of occupational healthcare and OHS, basically healthcare and safety. So OHS is one of the stakeholders. Then you have people function, what we call HR. It can actually be, and the legal obviously is owning up sexual harassment and code of conduct around that. IT would actually, and we have various verticals of IT, so it's not one IT, it's not right word to use IT. IT security would be actually responsible for one part of it. So, all these various stakeholders have their own contents and their understanding imbibed in this document. And this content then is taken up by, the learning and development. So we have a shared services for learning and development, and then there's, implementers out in the market areas. So, the content actually is developed around that for various stakeholders, little tidbits for various stakeholders. And this is floated online. So we use a platform, SuccessFactor is, and the learning module of SuccessFactor also is there with us. So it completes SuccessFactor. So in which the learning module also is there. So and then the shared services, which is part of group functioning, this content out to individuals as a mandatory training. And this is tracked. This is mandatory training. So that's one part of it. And these are 15 minutes, 20 minutes, tidbits, videos, video, then quiz, something of that sort. So it basically, keeps on. So it's not one-time activity. The code of conduct signing obviously is a yearly activity for us, for all the people, whether they are on contract, whether they are on, full-time employees, whatever type of employment they are in. So that is one, and the document obviously is reviewed every year. Then obviously one part which I would rather like to mention, that just to make that this code of this document actually is understandable and there is nothing lost in interpretation. So we do it for various languages all across the globe. It is in German, it is in Italian, it is in French, it is in Bahasa, it is in Bengali, it is in Sinhalese, etc. Whatever, whichever country. So we are present in 180 plus countries. So we do that. That is also one thing of it. But most importantly, what I feel is the most important part of it is that we have done ethics and compliances and integrity question. Integrity discussion is an important part of performance management. and this is we are currently standing at a 95-96% completion of that by the year end. So we are still standing. So the manager and the the reportee actually has to have that conversation. That's the most important piece, and that has to be documented out in the performance management, the online success factors. And in fact, ethics and compliance's code of conduct is such an important piece for us that out of the 5 qualities of employee that we are pushing right now, or the workspace that we should imbibe, one of them actually happens to be speak up. So there's a lot of branding around it that we do. In fact, the idea is that every session, every presentation should end up with that, so that we should encourage people to come up with that. We are also pushing our leaders to have that speak up, have a discussion around that speak up culture, that in case if you see anything happening which is not to the taste of the organization, you should speak up. So every employees meet, every unit discussion specifically gives a time for that to employees, and the leader should always emphasize that what we stand for. So that's also one of, so it's a physical space where we are trying to imbibe it. It's the philosophical space where speak up is actually one of the things. How exactly we keep our employees engaged is through the online thing. How to basically put it in the spirit that it is an important piece is performance management, where we are putting up integrity goals out in space. And nothing is lost in communication is the language piece and the review piece of it. So that's the 360-degree space that we are developing this, and so that it keeps that spirit alive of the document, and people are refreshing it again and again and living that in the organization and thinking and understanding that it is an important piece of their performance too.
No, that's very interesting and very comprehensive, Abbas. Thank you. So, just to clarify one aspect that you said, so is, amongst other things, you said integrity is very important, and it's actually a point of discussion between the manager and their subordinate at the time of performance review or appraisal. So that there are specific, if there are any issues, that's the time to bring it up or address it, etc. And feedback is also given, is it?
So it's an open discussion. It's an open discussion because nobody wants to put it into a block. It's an open discussion in terms of how we are living, how exactly we are living. So it's basically called integrity goal. It's called an integrity goal. We call it integrity goal. But the discussion largely is around how we are conducting the business, how the person value, and to make the person understand that we value his behavior. Where exactly we stand in terms of his behavior, in terms of his conduct of doing business. So whether the person is from a sales perspective, sales department, sales function of sales, or is the person's job role lies into people function, or the person lies into legal, any person, whoever, wherever the person is, how exactly he is performing. So that's an open discussion. A manager has to give a feedback. But the point is that, so why exactly it is kept separately? Again, and there's no definition to it, but I'm just trying to interpret it as an employee myself. The idea is that you can do great on your goals. That's the above part. We have done that. Now let us talk how you did that. So you have done it well. You are a successful person, but your behavior towards your teammates, your ethics in terms of ends justifies is end justifies means the spirit of you. So that is a conversation that is also very important. How you are living, what exactly we stand for. That's a conversation. So it has been separated out so that the idea is not about your tangible performances. The idea is about how we feel that you are representing us. So that's an important piece, and that has been taken out.
Agreed. And that I think is very, very helpful, Abbas. I think especially for a lot of our listeners and viewers who are kind of listening in, for them it will be very useful. It's a very useful takeaway in terms of how you can build a company and what are some of the elements that need to go into it. So fair enough. Thank you. So all right. So we are at an end of our session. We have another 7 minutes. So we have a slide to share with everybody in terms of a case study, so to speak. It happened with respect to an organization. So I'm going to quickly take you through it. I think it just gives an indication of how seriously organizations are taking COC violations. So Hero Motocorp sacked around 30 employees for violation of the company's code of conduct. And I think there's a little more. Rainmaker team could, yeah. What happened in this instance was that the executives are found fudging travel expense bills, accepting personal favors, gifts, and other benefits from some of the vendors, suppliers, and dealers in violation of the company's internal code of conduct. The executives were given marching orders after thorough investigations into the allegations against them. And a Hero Motocorp official actually has confirmed the development and actually said that all due legal procedures were followed before taking the final action. Third-party independent investigators were appointed to look into these cases, and once the anomalies were detected in the activity record of these executives. So basically, I mean, if you are found in violation, there is likely to be action and penal action. And of course, most organizations today have robust investigation processes in place, I think, to investigate any such allegations of wrongdoing and and then take action thereafter. So very, very important, I think, for employees to understand and learn that, look, there is a code, you need to read it, you need to follow it, and you need to be aware that if there is a violation, then that organization that you're working in is likely to take action as well. So all of those, of course, it might vary from organization to organization, what is considered very important and of an issue of great importance might in one company might not necessarily even be a blip on the radar of another. But that said, if you're working somewhere, you need to be sort of fully mindful of the kind of culture that you're operating in and the kind of code the code that your organization follows, and ensure that you're in compliance with your code. So make sure you take out time to read your code, you take out time to go through whether in whatever shape, manner, or form. All right, so with that, we will come to an end of our session. We have 4 more minutes, so I'm going to request if anybody has questions for our panelists, this would be a good time. If you have anything that you want to ask any of our panelists in particular, or to the panelists at large, we have 3 or 4 minutes before we wrap up, so you can share your questions on the chat, and I will be happy to take that up with our panelists before we wind up. So 2 or 3 minutes very quickly. We probably have time only for a couple of questions, so likely to be able to take the first 2 or 3 questions before we wrap up if anybody has questions. So one question that has come up is it's addressed to, I think, all panelists. What conflicts of interest should HR consider while establishing a conflict of interest program? So targeted specifically on conflict of interest. Any of you are welcome to sort of pick this up. What kind of conflicts should be picked up? Yeah, Abbas.
I can take this up. So first of all, there is no limit to conflict of interest. So the idea is that what we do in our organization, I'll just share that. We have made an online portal where any employee can actually come up, and I can give you one example, which can be as far as what, and we surely respect what that employee who came up with that. So it's an online portal. You can log in. That this is where exactly I see a conflict. So the idea is self-declaration of conflict of interest. We should not find it. You should tell us. So one of the employees came to us and said that, very senior guy, and he came to us and said that I have a commercial property, and one of my ex-bosses actually occupied that place. And now my ex-bosses, who's not part of Ericsson anymore, long back, he was long back, and he opened his own organization. But now he's actually he's also empaneled with Ericsson once again. So is it a conflict of interest now because he owns my commercial property? This is a wonderful example that a person is so, and please guide me. So the idea is that we thought about it. We looked at the contract of that organization. So we just said that because this person is not approving anything in terms of, he's not a stakeholder in the business they have. So there's no conflict of interest around the same, but surely we advise the person that if there is any change of circumstance, please do come back to us. But that's the way, in fact, it should operate. So it's a self-declaration, let the person judge, and then come back and report, and then we will interpret if it is. Because if it is proactive, then we can advise and guide rather than penalize.
Abbas, that's very interesting, actually. The self-declaration of a conflict of interest. I think that definitely gives employees something to think about. And also, it's always a good idea, right? If you go to your organization and say, I think I'm in a position of a conflict, please help me. And you can always work something out rather than it coming out later and then it becoming a big issue. So fair enough. I think what you've got as a part of your structure is definitely very interesting. Okay. We have actually 2, 3 more questions, but I don't think we have time for all of them. So I'm just going to quickly pick one and see if so there's something on data privacy and information security. So there's a question: data privacy and protection and information security are somewhat intertwined. Can you explain or clarify how they're different from each other? And anybody wants to take that one? Data privacy and information security.
In case of, okay, so maybe I can, in case of, so okay, so from a very from a very basic perspective, data privacy and information security are very, very different when you look at it from a definition. But there can be obviously some common points. But in a very layman term, we host a lot of information about people. Like, for example, my date of birth. So that's a data. That's my private data. The organization holds it. Organization holds that because organization makes some certain insurance provision. So organization also holds certain information about how many children I have, or am I married at all or not, or what is the age of my parents. This is all private data. So how exactly we will secure this data in terms that when we are sharing with the vendor, because obviously the insurance party also has the data. So the framework around the same obviously would be data privacy, and then obviously data privacy also goes on to what exactly is the kind of data that we hold out in the commercial space. That means what exactly we are performing. Now, information security is the structure in which we actually operate, and it's basically about how exactly it is designed and built around risks. Whether risk provisionings have been done, whether evaluation and calculation of the same thing has been done. So I would rather say that information security is a larger framework in which you build around in terms to basically manage the data privacy piece. But data privacy piece also is a lot of documentation in terms of non-disclosure agreements, because that's how exactly you share the data with the vendor, or what kind of ways of working you have in terms of handing over what kind of data you are ready to hand over, what kind of data you are not ready to hand over. Yeah, I mean, if that's basically the differentiation, understood. But then there is a lot of interchanging and handovers between the same. But information security, when you should look at it, it's a very large framework.
Yeah,
Thank you,
just to
Abbas.
add to what Abbas said, I think data privacy is more about informing the employee that we are having certain data of yours for a valid reason, and what is that reason that we are taking the data for. That's more at an employee-employer level, while he said about information security, that's more at an org level as to how we protect the data from the rest of the people who are partnering with us. So it is a contract between an employee and an employer saying that I have this data of yours and I'm going to be using this data for this and this reason. So that becomes a very clear contract between an employee and employer.
Yeah, and I just would like to add. So information security should be looked as an architecture. It is risk evaluation, it's business continuity, how exactly we are managing the platforms, who is managing the platform for us, if there is a conflict of interest in terms of who's managing the platform for us, and so on. But data privacy is basically a contract, yes, between the various stakeholders. It can be employees, it can be someone else who's actually sharing us with the data. But if there is private information, and if there is an information which actually has to be kept, what are the handovers and what exactly are the safeguards we have built around that? So that's a I would not say a smaller subset, but it's basically within that architecture that we operate.
And so data privacy, if you look at most of the countries, and especially Europe, has a law around it. And it's very important as an organization, we understand that the organization is a legal entity. It can sue and it gets consumed. And therefore, when you have data of these employees, it is the responsibility and accountability of the organization to protect that data. And any leakage in this, the company is held responsible for and liable for it. It can get into a huge legal tangle if they are not able to maintain this data privacy. Well, information security, the platforms as an organization you should have the right kind of platform, you should have the right kind of people to maintain, to ensure that this data privacy is not leaked.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you all. Last two questions. One is basically how to train managers to coach employees on social media usage. I think it's becoming an increasingly bigger problem. And so some guidance on how do you train your employees or coach your employees on social media usage? Is it as simple as just directing them to the COC, or is there something more that people can do?
So you have these policies regarding how do you handle the social media in organizations. There is an external communication policy. Clearly, the guidance in the code that we have put in that the comments that you say or you speak need not be the comments. You have to distinguish between your comments and Mahindra's comments. That's one piece, but definitely a guideline on how do you use social media is a responsibility of each and every employee, and it should be trained by the organization of what is allowable and what is not. Do's and don'ts need to be put in a place, because in any case, sometimes if you're talking for the organization, it may be looked or either ways, it may be looked as an opinion for of Mahindra or the company, and not of your individual nature. So when we are speaking, that question needs to be added in. I think the way it is, you need to put that policy in place.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Sujata. Anybody else has any inputs, or we can move to the next question?
So we have also included this specifically in code of conduct, because we wanted the employee to understand there is a personal space and there is a professional space. And we train each and every employee to understand that in your personal capacity, what you can do, and in professional capacity, what you can do, right? So that's creating awareness and putting it also as a part of code of conduct, because this is very, very critical in this era where every employee has his own personal account on LinkedIn, Twitter, is active on all these social media. So yes, putting things very clear what and to mind the gap between your personal space and professional space. And if you are getting into any kind of representing the company, you need a prior.
Just to add to what both of them mentioned, I think there's the key to asking questions before putting the content out there. There could be a set of 3 or 4 questions that the employee needs to ask themselves before putting some content on social media. How is this affecting my, affecting the image of my organization? Am I putting something really private, something which is very, 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 very confidential to the company out there? Or am I, putting across an information of another person in the organization whom I should not be doing? So there could be a set of 2-3 questions which one can ask, or you can put it in the document so that when I'm putting it out on the social media, it's easier for me to understand.
So one thing I'd just like to say, I mean, slight thought, I have a different thought on it, and our organization probably has a different thought on it. Obviously, it's not a written thing, but we have been discussing and debating this at a group function level. Obviously, different countries have different legal things, legal frameworks, and legal realities, and social realities also. But it is important that an employee should actually understand and should be made to understand that there is a repercussion in terms of what exactly is going on social media. You can, again, as I said, code of conduct and ethics also include when you are saying that I am for everyone, and you put in she, her, and me too, and whatever, and then you go on a social media and start calling out homophobic references.
Yeah.
So then there has to be I mean, we have put in advisories in some countries for certain people. So I'm not saying that we have taken any action as of now, but probably in the very near future, this would be a reality. And I'm not saying that about my organization, but I'm saying in a lot of organizations would be holding people responsible for the virtual realities that they live in. And I believe that they should be, because people should be called out immediately. I believe otherwise what exactly happens is that you have a bunch of xenophobic people masquerading as the most liberal beings out there in the professional space, and then going back in their houses. How do we react when an employee actually gets caught in a criminal case? I believe it's the same that we should react when people start showing off their true colors on social platforms. So, I mean, that's my way of looking at it, and there's no difference. I mean, either you are a person either you are a person with the same thoughts, or then you are a hypocrite that we have employed. That's how I see it.
Fair. All fair points. Thank you, panelists. So the last question is going to come. I think the person wants to ask the question to you directly. So we're just going
yes,
to
Antony, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Rainmaker, for making this happen. Fantastic panelists. My question is for Ms. Taunk directly. I saw that you handle Posh as well at Arvind. I'm a small startup founder. So how does one start off with setting up guidelines for Posh Bhargavi? My name is Sam. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Antony, for getting this done.
Thank you, Sam.
Hi, Sam. Thank you for the question. And I think Posh is something that is very much guided by the legal procedures that we follow. It has to be under the legal rules that we have, and the Posh Act as such. So the starting point will definitely be that, right? And we have to go through what does the Posh Act stand for, what are the rules that we need to abide by, what is the kind of committee that we need to include. We have a presiding officer. So all of these points are in detail mentioned when you look at a Posh Act, right? And that's the starting point. You cannot just take any decision based on what you want to do in an organization, because it's very, very legal in terms of what it is available. So that would be the starting point. However, as you grow as an organization, you will start looking at how you can make it more gender neutral. You can have more policies that is gender neutral. You can have internal committee, you can have a disciplinary committee guided by, external panelists if you don't have the expertise for it at the moment, right? So this is some of the steps that you take when you start a Posh committee. But ultimately, I think it's about having the right people in place with their head in the place and talking about the right intentions and how we cover and make sure that every employee is in a work safe environment. So that's about it.
All right, thank you, Bhargavi. Okay, so we have exceeded our time by about 12 minutes. So I think we owe a big thank you to all our participants for staying on, even post the allotted time. So that brings us to an end of this session. Once again, huge thank you to all of you, Bhargavi, Dheeraj, Abbas, Sujata, really for taking out time from your schedules, not just for today, but we've had a couple of preparatory discussions as well, and really appreciate the time that all of you have taken out from your schedules to make this happen. So thank you. We'll call this. I think we'll sort of pull curtains on this session, but I'm hoping that there are more such opportunities for us to discuss, maybe go into a little more detail on some specifics. Now that we have done part one, maybe we can have a sort of webinar, COC webinar part 2 coming up very soon, if all of our panelists can agree to make some time for it. So thank you all. For those of you who have attended today's session, thank you very much. Really appreciate the time that you have taken. Most of you have stayed on almost until the very end, and it's, I think, close to now 1 hour 40 minutes that you've been on the call. So thank you all. Thank you again to all the panelists. See you soon.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Antony.
Thank you, Rainmaker.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you all for attending it.